does this arrangement promote multi-party competition? Here we see that there is a runner-up prize for Party B, indeed, a very considerable runner-up prize. And despite the fact that Parties C and D received far less of the vote than Parties A or B, they will still win some seats in the country's parliament. They have a very powerful incentive to remain separate organizations. Now, since no party won an outright majority of the seats in Parliament, once their members are seated in Parliament in proportion to the percentage of the vote that they received in the election, parties will have to form coalitions in order to put together a government and move a policy agenda. This task would presumably fall to the party that has the most seats. In this hypothetical example, that would be Party A. But it is important to remember that Party A cannot just disregard all of the other parties and form the government on its own or pursue its own agenda without regard to the opposition. Imagine Party A's leader saying, "We won the election. We're going to have our party leaders be the Prime Minister, the Defense Minister, the Interior Minister, and hold all of the other cabinet ministries. And we are going to enact our programs of domestic and foreign policy." What would the leaders of Party B, Party C, and Party D likely do in response? It seems very likely that they would form a coalition and in effect say to Party A's leaders, "Not so fast." The coalition among parties B, C, and D hold 54% of the seats in Parliament. So we're going to form the government and we're going to move the policy agenda. So Party A is going to have to make concessions and deals with one or more of the opposition parties. These deals will likely come in the form of allowing the leaders of the other parties to hold ministerial posts, and they will likely have to take the views of the members of their governing coalition into account when making policies. Israel is an example of a country with a parliamentary system that works in a manner very similar to our hypothetical example. Let's briefly examine how the Israeli system works. Israel held national elections in 2013. As a result of the voting, according to the Israeli Foreign Ministry's website, 12 political parties won seats in the Israeli parliament, called the Knesset, with the Likud party winning the most seats, 31, by winning just over 23% of the vote, far short of an outright majority. So the Likud party had to form a governing coalition with other political parties that won seats in the Knesset sufficient to constitute a governing majority. According to the Israeli Foreign Ministry's website, Israel is a parliamentary system. The Prime Minister, who heads Israel's government, is chosen after the elections from a member of the newly elected Knesset, Israel's parliament. National elections to the Knesset are held once every 4 years unless circumstances call for early elections. The framework of the Israeli electoral system is defined in Article 4 of the Basic Law, the Knesset, which states, "The Knesset shall be elected by general, national, direct, equal, secret, and proportional elections in accordance with the Knesset elections law." Every Israeli citizen aged 18 or older on election day has the right to vote. Israelis of all ethnic groups and religious beliefs, including Arab Israelis, actively participate in the process. The entire country constitutes a single electoral constituency. The Knesset, the Israeli parliament, is elected directly by the voters, not through a body of electors. On election day, voters cast one ballot for a political party to represent them in the Knesset. All votes cast are equal in weight. Elections are by secret ballot. The 120-seat Knesset seats are assigned in proportion to each party's percentage of the total national vote. However, the minimum required for a party to win a Knesset seat is 2% of the total votes cast. To return to the basic point of this discussion, whether a country has a two-party system like the United States or a multi-party system like Israel depends primarily on the electoral arrangements it uses. The United States uses single-member districts and plurality elections, which create powerful incentives that foster two-party politics, or at least discourage multi-party politics. Israel uses a system of proportional representation, like many parliamentary systems, which provides strong incentives for multi-partyism. The lesson here is that if Americans are dissatisfied with the choice between only two political parties, as many Americans say that they are, it's not just a matter of forming new political parties. We would have to change our electoral arrangements, and the prospects for that sort of change in the United States seem highly unlikely. Try convincing Americans that the representational system created by the framers of the Constitution needs to be scrapped in favor of something similar to that used in a country like Israel or Italy or Spain. It should also be pointed out that in both the American two-party system and in parliamentary systems like Israel, majority coalitions must be formed in order to organize and run the government and move a legislative agenda. It just occurs at different times in the respective systems. Using the election as the point of departure, majority coalition building appears to generally occur before the election in the American system, as the Democratic and Republican parties attempt to appeal to as many voters as possible in order to win the election. Since several political parties are likely to win seats in Parliament and be part of the government in a parliamentary system such as Israel, majority coalition building takes place after the election. Both systems have their advantages. Parliamentary systems appear to enhance representation. Perhaps voters feel that their votes mean more, since they can vote for the party that most closely reflects their views without having to, quote, hold their noses, as many American voters claim that they do when they cast their votes on Election Day. In parliamentary systems, perhaps voters know that their party is likely to end up with at least some seats in Parliament. However, governing coalitions tend to be notoriously unstable in many of these countries. New elections have to be called when the governing coalition collapses. The American system's main advantage appears to be its stability. Governments are established for fixed periods of time and are only changed as a result of regularly scheduled elections.